We are good to go.
Hello, everyone. As always, as you're joining the stream, feel free to put where you're watching the stream from, and we'll do our quick shout outs while we're doing our marketing here.
Someone wrote hi from Pluto.
Hello from Earth.
That must be terrible reception, honestly.
You never know.
We already have questions.
Already have questions?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess even before we start the stream, if you want to download the PSD that I'll be working on today, because this is our first draw with CG Cookie, and you can find that on the community page, and it's a post that's in all caps live stream. So you click that, and there's a PSD that you download there.
We have hey from Hawaii from David Zerba. Hey from New York from Kitty Lizzie. Kate QVQ says hello. Nephlite Fleminstrom. That's a pretty cool name, actually. It says hello, everybody. Francisco G says stream hype. Stream hype, stream hype. Mika wants to know if you're excited for the new Star Wars movie.
I am. If you guys know, I'm not usually a sci-fi fan, but I am. I'm legitimately excited for Star Wars. Okay, let's see here. I think I'm good to go. Joe, you good to go?
I am good to go.
So how does... Well, I'll ask you after the stream. We'll figure that out later. Okay. Let me make sure the side over here is all good. And if you guys don't know, we're drawing a cherry today. And it's so much more than just a cherry, where I think sometimes breaking down really simple subject matters into the complex forms makes it easier for you to understand, like, how lighting works or how color interacts with lighting or bounce lighting. Like, things that are more complex being broken down into a very simple subject matter. All right. I'm good for launch, for takeoff. You ready, Joe?
Yes, I am ready.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Tim Von Rieden, and I'm joined with Joe Chico.
Hello.
And welcome to the Wednesday CG Cookie live stream. I still got to think of like a smooth, fluid way to introduce it, because no longer are we Concept Cookie, as you might have noticed from the website, but we're the 2D digital art section of CG Cookie. And we do these live streams every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Time, and that's -5 GMT if you're outside of the States. And we usually post what we're going to be working on about 2 hours beforehand, and the streams usually last about an hour. Now, if this is your first time, you can ask any question regardless of what we're working on. It could be about digital art, it could be funny, it could be something about blending or color, anything in particular. We like to focus on usually 1 or 2 discussions per live stream. I don't have any particular ones this time, but they can range from serious to, like what we said before, more funny. And we just like to have a good time while we learn, and hopefully that these will be a community building service, as well as, because I always think that the best way to learn is to enjoy the process of learning, so I hope that this kind of contributes to that idea. All right, so today we're going to be drawing a cherry, and if you want, you can download the PSD and draw right alongside me. I'm going to try to work a little slower today so that if you're drawing and watching, you don't feel like you're constantly going back and forth and you miss something in like a split second. So I'll try to go pretty slow, but we're going to try to hit like an hour 10 maybe pace. So that's kind of the time frame that we're looking at. And I wanted to do a quick shout out before we start to Tigil, who sent, can you see these? Oh, is the microphone in the way?
Yes, no.
Who sent like a very large, vast collection of feathers to me in the mail, and it was like this great package to receive, and I'm definitely going to be drawing a lot of that and incorporating that into some of my future drawings. But it was like the coolest little surprise in the mailbox, so thank you again for doing that if you're here. All right. Oh, and as always, we upload these videos to YouTube after we're done recording. So if you want to watch them after, or maybe the time difference is too much where it's like 2 a.m. for you and you'd rather just watch the YouTube video, we always upload all of our live streams. All right, you ready to switch over, Joe?
Yep, ready to
All
go.
right. So I'm going to switch to the PSD that you can download. There we go. All right, and one of the layers is called hide this info layer. So when you hide that, it takes away all the green text, and pretty much we're left with the initial sketch, the color palette, and the first render kind of test that I did of the cherry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the finished result to the corner here so we can really focus on just the cherry. Make this bigger. And then I'm going to move the color palette just a touch up too. All right. So for this, I'm going to start with, I'm actually maybe using, initially I did the chalk brush, but I almost want to use the well, this is in the basic package. So if you want to use the same brushes that I'm using the basic chalk brush that you can download on CG Cookie, and it's under resources. Or no, it's under, let me double check, I don't want to give you the wrong information. But pretty much, I'm only going to be using the basic brushes, and then for some of the texture that we're going to add on later, I am going to be using 2 specific brushes that are not free brushes, so you do have to buy them off of cgcookie.com. But for the most part, we're going to be working with the free brushes. So it's under the Resources tab on the left-hand side of CG Cookie. That's where you can find the brushes that I'm working with here. Okay, so here you can see our chalk brush, and if you have the PSD open, and if you don't have it open, open it now because I'm gonna get going right here. I'll try to make this, maybe I'll move that down. All right, there we go. All right, so the reason that I have the color palette set up in a range of a darker value to lighter value is because I like to work on a darker foundation and then build up the lights and the colors on top of it. So for this, the first color I would use is this dark red. And then for the stem, I'm going to use this dark brown, maybe mix in some of this really dark green, but the darkest green was more for right in this part where it meets with the pit of the cherry, or I guess I should say like this indentation of the cherry. So I'm not going to use too much of that darkest green. I'm going to stick with this darker, almost brown green color. So I'm going to color pick this red using Alt. I'm going to pick it up, make my brush size bigger. I'm going to lay it on pretty heavy. Oh, and I should say you should make a new layer first under the outline layer. So the outline layer is its own layer, and I'm creating a new layer underneath of that. So first things first, I'm going to lay it on pretty heavy so that I'm not worried about the outlines. Because I think especially with younger artists, because I had the same problem myself, is I was so focused and preoccupied with keeping it within the lines that I was being so inefficient with my time and the use of my time. So I've kind of trained myself not to care if I go outside of the lines and then just know I'll be able to clean it up later. Because right now, especially in the early stages, I only want to focus on creating a clean base.
We have a fantastic question here.
All right, let me hear a fantastic question.
From Alex Green. Why is this not staying on your screen?
Oh, you got to click my box.
I did. Okay, there we go. For some reason. Okay. It says, do you want to be the very best, Tim? Like no one ever was?
You know what? I'm almost taking that as a serious question. And you know, I think I'm going to answer in a serious question. Yes and no. I think as an artist, and I know this had no intention of being serious, but I think as an artist, you always strive to be the best, but at the same time, you're always striving to be the student rather than the master. So I think it's that balance of, yeah, I'm always striving to be the best, but I'm not competing against other people. I'm trying to be the best that I can be, kind of like what the question's saying. And I think it's good to have that balance of striving to be the best, but at the same time accepting the fact that there's always more to learn and that you can never be at the pinnacle of your, I guess, artistic limit, because you create your own limit. All right, so if you guys have the base done by now, and if you, I'm going to kind of be doing this in segments where I'll do, like step 1 was lay down the base colors, and then I'll take like maybe a 30-second pause just so that everyone can catch up, and then I'll keep continuing with it. So then I'll write what I do up here. Oh, and I had, really quick, I had 2 people ask me if I upload my stuff anywhere besides CG Cookie, and if I had an Instagram. So really quick, my Instagram is, you don't even have to thinking Twitter, too many social networks, I tell you. So that's the Instagram tag there. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to stick with the same brush, so still using this chalk brush, and I'm going to create a new layer, and then I'm going to grab that next color above the darkest value. So in this case, I'm working with this red here. And if you're wondering where I got the color palette from, I took from reference pictures. I took from a few. I was going to take my own, but I only have black cherries in my fridge right now, and it doesn't really offer that much color balance. It's just very, very dark with like a highlight, and I wanted to include more red. I think red's one of the easiest colors to work with, so I think this is a good practice on working with color. I'm hoping it shows up a little easier for you on the live stream, because on my screen it's very, very light, but just even these subtle shifts of red are very important for me to continue working with.
J Diamond asks, is each shape getting its own layer?
Each step will be getting its own layer. The stem and the cherry, I'm just going to keep on a single layer, because I feel like when I go to edit, like when I mask it out, I don't feel like there's too much difference in this little area here for me to care about separating the 2 forms. And this might be just more of like an efficient thing where if there were a lot of overlapping shapes, then yeah, but since it's just this little area right here, I'm not going to care too much.
Jake Scott just asked, Joe, do you have Instagram? Yes, I do. I believe it's Joe Chico Art. I'll have to double check on that. I'm really bad at social networking posting. I don't post a whole lot, but I do have some stuff on there, so you can check it out. I know my Twitter handles that for sure. Mike asks, hey Tim, are we still going to get a video on action poses?
It won't be for a while, just because of the restructuring with 5.0. The next course that me and Joe are working on is the color course, and we haven't even been able to fully dive in yet because of the workshop that's going on right now. So a lot of my time is being spent doing reviews and critiques and live streams specifically for them. But we're in week 3, and there's 5 weeks. So after that 5-week period, then we're going to really dive in. So I'm really excited to do these, not only these new color tutorials, but we're redoing some of the original basic ones too, and talk more about the mindset of being an artist, because I feel that's so important, and I don't want to just dive right into the process of learning if I feel like you need to be in the right mindset to learn before you even start learning. So really quick, I added these 2 suns to represent the light sources. So we're going to have one that's going to be very prominently displayed on the cherry with a highlight there and here. And this is going to only be perceived when we do the highlights, but we want to kind of build up our colors leading up to the highlight. So that's why we're doing all this foundation work first, and then we're going to go up this color palette in value so that it gives an indication of where the light source will be when we add the highlights. Because sometimes you don't want to just lay out a highlight on a surface, because without any buildup, sometimes it reads as, it could just read as very metallic or extremely shiny, and that's not always the case of the material you want to work with, especially with like this cherry. There's definitely some buildup of pre-highlights.
Cisco Punch 67 says, "What happened to Joe? All I'm seeing is Frito Bandito, and I'm totally stealing that name. That is going to be that persona is Frito Bandito." Uh, Jordan Nelson says, "Hello from Indianapolis, the place you drive through to get somewhere better."
Oh,
I
that's sad.
was like, it's like, oh, ooh. Lily Hosga Good says, "I've recently undertaken 100 days of studies, which is going great, but I haven't really drawn anything from imagination since I started, and I feel a bit like I'm losing something. Like there's no personality in my art, and I'm not expanding my imagination."
I agree. I think when you do studies, you're not building on your imagination or your visual library. You're very much focused on the technical aspects of art, which is good because then you can apply your imagination with those skills in mind. But just know that's normal. But you you shouldn't feel like you're losing your imagination. It's always with you. And uh, I think then after you're done with these studies, you should do something where you're applying those studies. Me and Joe talk about this a lot where it's great to do studies, but unless if it's becoming practical or you're applying it, it really almost goes to waste because then that knowledge that you're acquiring, you're not putting it to the test. You're just constantly rehashing other people's studies or like master studies. They're great, but only if you can learn from them and apply it to your own work.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we did the exercise. I think it was 37 and 38 with
Mhm.
doing the master studies and then applying it to your own work. It's super important that you don't uh, stop trying to be creative because at that point you fall into that trap of just being a copy machine, and that's not what people want. That's not fun.
Mm-mm. So really quick, I did another layer of this lighter value. So now I'm working with this lighter red. And to blend it, I'm using just like quick circular brush strokes on the tablet. And I'm building it up near where the highlights are. And the reason I'm building up the lower half of the cherry is because since it's going to be sitting on a surface, kind of like what we see in the final result, there's a lot of bounce lighting that's happening, especially with this cherry that's sitting on like this light gray uh, foundation, and the whole room applies that it's like this gray backdrop as well. So a lot of that gray is going to be bounced up and hitting the bottom underside of this cherry. So that's why I'm building up some of the lighter values here as well. Okay, now I'm going to grab the lighter colors where they almost verge on being like a magenta or a pink. I'm going to apply those very, very lightly because this is going to be overtaken by some of the grays that I'm going to add onto the cherry. And something that I don't know if I've ever done a tutorial about it before, but I love incorporating just neutral gray into the piece itself. Now it works out where the cherry, we're kind of placing it in a gray environment, but sometimes when you want to make your pieces very colorful and read with a harmony, you always think that you need to add more colors, or at least that's the way I was taught growing up. And then once it was sometime after college where I realized if you add gray, you can actually make the other colors more vibrant by contrast, and that way you're actually making it more colorful by adding a color that actually is like void of hue. So it was always interesting to me about how contrast is so important when working on your own stuff. So I'm literally color picking this gray and I'm lightly applying it to the edge of the cherry, and you can see how we get somewhat of a gradient between, or not a gradient, or it's like a transition of color between the two where it almost appears to be like a light pink or like a light red. And we're going to blend this out later, but that's kind of the color I'm looking for right now. I'm going to lay it on the highlights. And with this chalk brush, if you push down hard, it's more of a solid stroke. But then if you lay it on really lightly, you can see how you get that texture look. And I'm going to try to get that with the texture on the cherry here. Now, I'm not trying to overbuild it right now. I'm just trying to give it the first coat of a highlight. So this is still like the pre-highlight stage.
Joe
If I'm
Donovan asks, oops, sorry,
Oh,
what?
sorry, really quick. If I'm working too fast, let me know in the comments, and then maybe I could slow it down and answer a few more questions here.
Jay Donovan asks, hey Tim, I was looking at the palette. Are you selecting a base color for the cherry and the stem, and then from there, base colors and then from those base colors using the color selector to build the palette so that it remains uniform? Do you ever choose to use complementary colors?
Yes. Uh, this was more of a reference study, but I choose the base colors for the cherry and the stem, yes, and those are these two here, like we talked about earlier. And then when I build them up, I've got to reread your question. Using the color selector. No. This one was a direct reference color pick, so I picked from the reference itself. But I will say, while I'm working, I do eyedropper tool the colors that I already laid down in my piece rather than constantly going back to the palette. Because once you lay it down in your piece, like this color that I'm picking up right now, this is not in my color palette. It's very similar, but it's a mixture of a few colors that we used from the color palette, so it's a whole new color entirely. But since it's a mix, it was formed based on a mixture of the colors we already laid down. That's why I feel comfortable using it, because then I'm not creating a lack of harmony. If anything, I'm kind of pushing for more of a harmony between the colors. And then the complementary color thing, yes. If I'm going for more fantastical lighting, which I do more in my original pieces, I will. But like for stuff like this, I will try to keep it more of a reference study.
Christy McAvee says, hey Tim, my question is, how do you become fast enough to do life drawing? Whenever I go outside and draw people, I always get frustrated because I'm not fast enough to capture their look.
Oh man, I wish I would have taken a picture of. I did life drawing studies over the weekend. I was at a family vacation, and there was a pool. So of course I had to sketch people because I always have that urge to sketch people. And then while I was doing it, you have to capture the gesture really quick because you're right, they move. They're not going to stand still for you, especially if they don't know you're drawing them. You, what I like to do is I draw quick. Actually, I can show you on the side here. So like, let's say I was drawing. I remember there was this boy sitting down, and I'll draw like quick angular strokes to represent the edges of his form. I'm trying to work quick when I'm doing this because I know at any given moment he could either get up, walk away. He was sitting on the edge. Should have started more in the middle, but then I'll add like once I have the solid outline, I won't start shading and I won't start detailing. Rather, I'll look for more subtle shifts, whether it's like the lighting and shadow, quick marks that I can add in, maybe like an impression of a belly button, a neckline if it's pronounced enough. And I'll try to work up little details like this until he actually moves. So once he moves, then I'll start going in and I'll start shading and adding more of a realism look. But I don't want to start doing that until I can capture as much of what is presented in front of me first. So that's usually how I do my gesture drawings. All right, really quick, I'm going to move on to the stem of this. I hope this wasn't too fast for you. I know like the pre-highlights it definitely makes a bigger impression. Like when I turn that layer on and off, it definitely, you can sense where the direction of the cherry is heading. So I think this is a big step. So I'm hoping you guys, I'm not moving too fast here. But I'm going to start building up the stem.
Dave T asks, Joe, are you trying to become the cherry best? Like no one ever was ever before. That's pretty much to catch them is my real quest.
Well, to train students is my cause.
Yep. I will travel. Okay, that's enough. Caroline asks, "Hey, or hi, Tim and Joe. I was wondering, what do you think about adding photo textures to a painting? Do you do it sometimes?"
Yeah, I do. I think there's a art to adding photo textures. I try to stay away from it if I have the time, but in true concept artist mindset, it definitely saves a lot of time just like overlay a leather texture on a pair of pants when you want to get that like crinkled leather look. So I can totally understand it. But if you're doing it and it's more of an illustration, I think the best thing you can do is blend it in, work it in to the point where the viewer wouldn't be able to tell that it was a texture. And that's usually the advice I would give for something like that. Otherwise, a lot of the time, it just looks like a texture was thrown over. And it can be very, very distracting, where it almost like is distracting to the point where I can't focus on the piece as a whole. I'm just staring at that texture or that brush or that material that they just laid over or stamped on really quickly. So I think the best advice is know that if you're doing that, blend it in to the best of your ability.
Yeah, and Falcon says, "Hi Tim. So I've been drawing the same picture over and over again with very small alterations, and it's been bothering me a lot because I know I'm not really learning anything by just drawing the same thing. Any ideas on how to stop drawing the same thing?"
I feel like you don't even need me to answer that. I feel like you answered it yourself. Just stop drawing the same thing. If you're drawing a lot of characters, take a risk and draw some environment stuff or do creatures. Maybe do something that isn't that far from what you're comfortable with, but far enough where you can still learn something new. If it's definitely a comfort zone. I think when people redraw the same thing over and over, and I definitely catch myself with it too. Sometimes when I draw my profiles in my sketchbook, it's a comfort zone. It's easy. At that point, there isn't much thought process behind it, and it's like autopilot, and that's why we do it. And I think for you, you need to like turn that autopilot off and really challenge yourself and be like actively aware of what you're drawing and making sure it is different than what you're used to.
Ready to go. I just saw it. It says Louis Hampson no longer in Wales, now hi from England.
Oh, seriously?
I
That's
did,
awesome.
yeah.
That's where I was talking with our friends about going next year. I want to go to Western Europe, and I think England was going to be the point that I want to go to. That'd be really cool if we could say hi.
Yeah. Random question, Tim. Do you have any tattoos or artist friends with a lot of tattoos?
I do not have any tattoos, but I do have a lot of friends that have a lot of tattoos. Especially recently, I feel like I've met some in particular that have a lot. I probably won't ever get a tattoo. If I did, it would. Yeah, I don't know. I think it was one of those things where if I got a tattoo, I really like when people get tattoos that conform to the different muscles and anatomy of their body, where they see it as a whole, and especially people that have like shapes as tattoos, especially like on their arms, where it is like a contour and it improves the or not improves I should say it adds an interest in the look of the anatomy itself. So those are the tattoos that really interest me. And then maybe maybe ones that are well obviously I think the sentimental ones are cool too.
Serenity Moonshadow asks, or says, "Hello from Germany," and then asks, "How important are flashy effects like the ones you can create with Photoshop, in your opinion, and how decent should one use them?"
I would say very little important. I don't think I think flashy effects are like a crutch for artists to use when they're not capable of doing it without the effect. Like sometimes, especially when I was in school, people used what is the let me see if I can find the filter. Lens flare, that was it, to add dynamics to their piece, and it was so distracting where it almost like was blatantly telling everyone in the class, I don't know what I'm doing, and the teacher kind of harped on him for quite a while. So I don't think using those is efficient or it can be efficient, but I think it's more of a crutch. And I think once you really understand how to do it on your own, you can use those Photoshop effects to lessen the time. It's more efficient, but you're using them in a way that's more wisely placed, where you're not just using it because you don't know how to do it yourself. Like my biggest crutch, if I want to get a little personal, is using an overlay or multiply blend mode. And recently I've tried, even like with this cherry right here, I'm not going to use any overlay or multiplies. I really want to make sure that the colors I'm choosing and laying down had a purpose, and I'm creating that vibrancy or that contrast in values purely based on the colors I'm choosing. Because once I have a deeper understanding of color and the colors that I'm choosing, it will create a better piece and understanding than having to just rely on overlay and multiply to do the work for me, essentially. Okay, so I did the stem. Pretty much, if you guys are working on the stem too, I pretty much just use lighter values in the green here to build up, and I'm trying to just slightly do maybe a little more build up in the center of, I'll say, the stem itself, and then get darker on the edge. And then where it connects to the top of the cherry here, I made the brush smaller, and it created some look of texture and distress on the stem. And then the very top of the stem, if you've seen them, it can vary on the look, but the reference that I found had like this brown, almost like pine cone-esque look to it. So I try to recapture that with these smaller brush strokes and create the illusion of the look that it was picked off of the plant that it was growing from. Okay, I think from here, this is when I'm going to combine all those layers down. So last time, here's the steps that we did. Foundation, build up of the values, and the stem. So I'm going to make a new folder, save that. And if you guys want, I'll upload this one at the end so you can see the steps that we did here as well. There we go. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my eraser tool. And there's a few ways to do this. I think this is probably the most common, is using the eraser tool. But another way to do it would be like using your selection tool, working on the edge of the outline, and then pulling out your eraser and doing it. I want to become more efficient using that way. I just feel like it is more effective. Sometimes when you're using eraser, you get brush strokes that are left behind, and there's some opacity that's still there. So I really like using the selection tool. Sometimes, though, you can see how it creates a little edging problem, but that can be solved really quickly with the smudge tool. But we can work on that after we're done kind of cleaning it up. So I'm going to keep the outline on as we go around and erase the excess here.
We hit about the 30 mark, just so you know.
Ah, thank you.
Fabian Dornbos asks, when you sketch people, do you really measure the person that you're drawing? Because when I'm trying to do portraits without a grid or other methods to measure precisely, my portraits never look like the person I was drawing. Any advice?
This is another thing Joe and I talked about like last week about the process in which people create their art, and it's different for every person. That's why it's sometimes hard to teach creating art and digital art, because the way that I go about like even drawing profiles is vastly different than the way you probably go about doing it. When I see a profile, I guess really quick, I do draw a circle to start off, but from that point forward, I never draw guidelines. I don't draw foundation shapes. I don't draw those helpful tips. I just go for it, because at this point I've done profiles so many times that I don't need to be thinking about it too consciously to get the look that I'm going for. Something like this. Now, when you're trying to recreate someone using reference, you do want to be very conscious of the subtleties that make their face unique to who they are. So I think that is a little more challenging. But if you're going for more of like an imagination profile, you're using the tips and techniques that you already have built into your brain. And I don't feel like you necessarily have to rely on them, where a lot of them are built into your head, so you don't have to lay them down every single time. There comes a point where you do get confident enough where you just go. And I want you guys to reach that where you're being so much more efficient with your work because you feel confident in your brush strokes and your foundation knowledge. So then like this would be a good example of how I start my profiles. So I'm not really lining things up, but I have enough confidence in my ability where I think it would line up pretty proportionally. And if I need to edit it later on, or even like right now, if I was like, I don't really like the placement of the lip, like I can still edit it in this period where I would just erase it and tweak it, whatever you need to do. So just try a few where I even have a tutorial on this you can watch about the importance of throwaways, where if you go in with the idea of I don't care if it looks perfect, I'm just going to go, I don't really have any set direction in mind, sometimes those are the pieces you learn the most because you're not limiting yourself to being like constructive on making sure everything lines up perfect, and it's a lot more liberating and it's fun. And once you do it a few times, you're like, oh, I can see where maybe some of my proportions are a little off, but I know for the next time I can fix that. And then the next head you do, the proportions are a lot more accurate. And it's kind of like the idea of through repetition you learn, but it has to be active repetition. You can't just like do it with no thought, with having that autopilot turned on.
Oh man, we're getting some cherry puns in.
You're getting a bomb of cherries.
Scopunch67 says, "Where did the cherry study stem from?"
Where?
No, I mean that thing.
No, I know, I know.
He's
No,
just like super quiet. Just...
Trust me, no, that one did not go over my.
Oh, Lotus Nevermore. Tim and Joe, do you ever get obsessed with art-related TV? I feel like I must watch any show where art's skilled involved compulsively, like Face Off, Skin Wars, Ink Master, Project Runway. I think I have a problem. Please say it's not just me.
Oh, it's not just you. I actually love Face Off, and the new season starts next week. Actually, if you really wanted to get more into it, the group that I run, where it's like a Monday night live stream battle, it's called Doodle Art Battle, and we usually pick a topic. And what I want to do with our new season that's going to start in August is every week of Face Off, whatever theme or idea that they have to compose in that episode, we're going to take that and use it as a theme we have to do. Because I think it's good to branch out than what's expected or what you come up with, and having someone else's idea, it intrigues you in a different way where then you explore territory that you've never done before. So like last season, or maybe it was the season before, I think it was last season, where one of the week's challenges was to do, it was like the House of Cards or something, and they got to do character designs based on like the Queen and the King and the Jack and the Ace and the Joker, and like that was so cool to me where immediately I had to pull out my sketchbook and I started sketching some different ideas, and I love that theme because I wouldn't have thought of exploring that on my own unless if it was prompted like it was with Face Off. So yes, I love Face Off. I watched most of Project One Ray. I've seen Ink Master a few times, and I've never seen Skin Wars. That's it. What about you, Joe?
Uh, I'm not really obsessed with TV. I mean, Face Off is awesome. There's no doubt about it. And after meeting Novell Page, that was even cooler. But yeah, no, Face Off is definitely. I'm excited for you guys to actually start that up and do the challenges and whatnot.
I'm so excited.
Because that'll be really cool. To sit down and just like sketch.
Mm-hmm. Alright, so here's the point where I'm going to hide the outline layer. So you can see we don't even really need it that much anymore. I try not to use line art as a crutch. I used to be so obsessed with making it fit and having the line art be perfect, but now I don't. I can work without line art to a point. I still like to have an early sketch, so even like the profile, I'll still do an early sketch, and then I'll just go right into blocking out the different shapes and values. So the thing with this that is a glaring problem to me is the edges, and they are such a distraction because they're slightly bumpy. There's an irregularity to it that I don't like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the smudge tool, and from here I'm going to just do a brief touch-up on the entire outside, and you'll see what that will do to it once I'm all finished. Actually, I'll do a before and after. Let me copy this cherry. It's made a duplicate of that layer. I'm going to quickly go around the outside here.
Really fast, Ebra Alex says, Tim, can you make something to do with the sketching and the line art of a picture/character portrait?
Wait, what? Can you make something to do with the sketching and the line art of a picture? I don't understand what the question is.
Neither do I. I think you kind of did it with the how you drew the head earlier. I think that's kind of, but I'm wondering if they just mean like line art, just straight up line art.
Yeah, I guess if I was to turn that profile into line art, I would just turn that layer's opacity down and then create as clean of a line art as I can on top of it.
Jake Scott asks, Tim and Joe, do y'all drink and draw?
Joe can't drink, so no.
No. Yeah.
But yes, I do.
Man, that sounds so sad. Joe can't drink.
Joe can't drink.
He's not allowed. Cisco Punch 67 asks, is there a Google Hangout where anyone can join and draw together?
I have a personal one with my art friends, but if there is a widely open one, I guess I'd be curious if there is one. Where I think just because of bandwidth, sometimes it's hard to have one open all the time for like a large amount of people. But I know if you have your own art community of friends, like if you're going to school or something, definitely start one up. I think it's like a great idea of where anyone can join, anyone can leave at any time, but it's open for you to receive instant feedback right there rather than having to wait to show someone like the next day at class or something.
I wonder if there's a way to set up, because I know the Level Up guys use a Google Hangout. They have like 3 different rooms or something like that. I wonder if we get one for the community.
That'd be cool. All right, so really quick, here's the difference between the sharp edge cherry and the softer edge. So then from here, I'm going to go ahead and mask it out. So if you don't know how to do masking, we have a tutorial on that. But pretty much, I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to hold Command on a Mac and it's Control on a PC. You click the layer that you want masked out, and then you should see the selection tool like we are right now. And then at the bottom of the Layers menu, there's a box with a sphere on the inside. You click it, and now that layer is masked out. So now when we draw on it, it only will cater to the area that you masked out. So this is wonderful because now we don't have to worry about the edges and going outside the edges and then having to erase it if need be. So from here, I'm going to work with the skin brush. So now this one, let me make a new layer so you can see what it is. So this is the skin brush. It's slightly porous, but it's on a small enough level where it's really great for blending. So I'm going to use that to get more shading on this cherry here.
Beatrice DT asks, is there a way to get the Reckless deck outside of the US? Or is there a similar thing out there that ships worldwide?
To be honest, I don't run Reckless decks. Oh, I'm getting a really bad echo, Joe.
Are you?
Yeah. I don't run Reckless decks. I met the artist that runs it at Spectrum, and I bought it from him there. I assume if you Google it, you should be able to find... Actually, no, never mind. I do remember someone even sent me a message saying they weren't able to buy one because they're international. So you would have to email the artist himself that ships them out, and he would be able to help you from there.
You're not getting any feedback, right?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Jordan Nelson asks, hey Tim, do you have any advice on understanding subsurface scattering? Most of the time it feels like I'm guessing and hoping for the best rather than really understanding the way that light works in that instance.
That's a good. I feel like I can't do a quick demonstration on that right now. I that could be an entire live stream by itself. But I think the best thing you can do is one, use reference. That's like such a huge one for subsurface scattering. And if you feel like you're doing it wrong or if it's guessing, there's a good chance where it's too prominent in your piece, where I would almost tone it down. And I'd also have to see what you're working on, because if you're doing like an earlobe and you're doing like light from behind it, like that you can find reference of really easy. But if you're doing like an aquatic creature that has some subsurface scattering to it, yeah, you can't get a reference picture quite as easily. I'm sure you can find one, but maybe not the pose or the direction that you're looking for. So let me read the second best of the question here. Oh, the other thing is if you don't understand what's going on, Color and Light by James Gurney, I know we mentioned this book a lot, but he talks about that and the actual like science behind it. Now, there's even books that further explain it. I think, Joe, you've seen a few.
Yeah, Scott Robertson's book is like huge into like technical, like this is the way it is, this is why this does this. So and it's his how to render book.
Mm-hmm. Because there is like an understanding to it that you could dive into. Okay, so now I'm color picking the colors on the edge, and I'm really pushing the blending where it looks a bit roughed out still. So sometimes I like having the brush strokes be seen, but in this case, I want to keep it fairly blended, especially when I'm using a texture brush like this. I can rely on the texture that's being left over when I'm blending to do some of that leftover brush look.
A lot of people are actually asking for a Google Hangout, like a permanent one.
I know I talked to Wes about this before. It's just one of those things where right now we can't do it, but it's something we can totally research into doing in the future. All right, really quick, I'm going to do these highlights because I think this is the point where a lot of people get screwed up, where the highlights might look off. So here, I can see that they're a bit strong, so I'm going to use this skin brush to draw over a lot of it. And I'm going to make the brush pretty small, and I'm going to work with slightly irregular brush strokes, so moving in slightly different directions, because with an organic object and surface like this, I'm not going for perfectly clean manufactured sheen. I'm going for more of there's slight bumps and nuances that can be reflected in the highlight itself. Even smaller than that.
Julia Dreyer says, hello from Germany. I'm 19 and I have not drawn anything since I was 10. Now your live streams got me interested in art, but I don't know how I should get started. What equipment should I get and how would you go about learning? Any advice for a total beginner?
Yes, okay. So total beginner advice right now. One, I think I'm going to talk about the mindset a little bit, but in terms of the actual physical things that you need, sketchbook, some kind of drawing software. So in this case, I'm using Photoshop, but there are free ones if you want to test it out first before you invest in one. So like GIMP is a free one, open source. And actually, I should say every software has a free 30-day trial. So if you want to test out a few, maybe you would really like Photoshop, but you're just not sure yet, try out the free 30-day tryout, and you might like one software over the other. Like some people really like Corel Painter or Paint Tool Sai better than Photoshop, but for the most part, they're very, very similar, where they don't have too much of like glaring differences between them. Secondly, draw every day, and don't get discouraged. I think with younger artists, it's really easy to be very negative or hard on your work, where you need to realize, and I think you do, that like starting off, you're not supposed to have like masterpieces, and you're not supposed to be as or produce works that are as great as the images you see on DeviantArt or like the artists that we would consider like masters. Like you're not supposed to create art like that right out the gate. Not even probably within the first like 3 years, if that even. So I think having the right mindset on that is good. And the advice that I really latched onto was someone said, you are born with 10,000 crappy drawings, and it's up to you to get them out before you start producing good work. So it's kind of a good way to explain that patience is so important for an artist to grow and develop, because that's what it takes to become a good artist, is just a lot of time, and you invest in uh, your drawing capabilities, and it does take a while. So, and then the last thing with the mindset is uh, don't, if you really want to make art your passion and your career, it has to be your priority. And I know I say this a lot, but people that tell me that they don't have time, it's like glaringly obvious to me that they're just saying, I don't prioritize my time well. And for you as an artist, if you want to be an artist, you have to draw every day, even if it's something small. It can be even like a 5-minute doodle, something. It's consistency for that matter. But then the second thing is being very self-aware and being able to evaluate your work and where your weaknesses are and how to work on them. Because once you're very honest about your own work and like what isn't so great, what is great, what's working, what's not, and you're able to focus on the problem areas, that's when you really start growing as an artist. So I think having the right mindset is so important, and sometimes artists miss that memo. They just go for it and they expect to get better in time, but if they don't really actively think about it, sometimes it, or I would say almost all the time, it takes so much longer for that artist to grow and develop.
Dave T asks, Joe, if you could choose to be one of the Marvel superheroes, which one would you be and why? Uh, Man, that's tough. It depends on what level we're talking about. Like, if I just had those superpowers, then I would definitely just be like, I'm Spider-Man. But if it was like, I'm Peter Parker and I live Peter Parker's life, then no, because every time that I would have like my first girlfriend, she would die, and that would suck. What about you, Tim?
Ugh. Uh, it actually took me a second because I'm not that big of a superhero fan, so I was like, what ones are Marvel? So obviously all the Batman, Superman, all those are thrown away. Is X-Men DC?
No, that's Marvel.
Oh, okay. Then I'd be Mystique.
Yeah, it's my second one. Is Mystique.
Hmm.
She just be anybody.
She's cool as hell. I like her. I mean, it'd be weird being that in that position, but
You'd be
I
a
like
damn
it.
good assassin.
All right. All right. So right now, I have this highlight on the left side that doesn't match up with the highlight on the right side. So I'm going to color pick and make it match quite a bit more. Where this one's way too subtle, especially if this one has a stronger reflection on the cherry, I want to give a stronger highlight to it here.
Oh, Dennis has informed us that we have a permanent Google Hangout in the Cookies and Cocoa group that's open to all artists until an official one is created.
Oh, seriously? That's awesome.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. Well, cool. I think, yeah, Dennis, if you want, could you put that in the community? Or I don't know if you already did. I've been so distracted with the workshop, but if you already did, that's awesome. But if you didn't, it would be great if you could make a post and like let everyone know the link, and yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to boost that.
Yeah.
Kate QVQ says, Dear Tim, I have two questions that bother me lately. First one is how to promote myself as an artist on sites as Tumblr and DeviantArt. Started doing fan art, but now I want to make my own stuff. And second one is how to talk to other artists.
Okay, these are good questions. So promoting yourself as an artist, I think branding is like such an underspoken area of concept art where being a successful artist, I feel like you have to know how to brand yourself as well. It sounds really unfortunate, but the artists that we know the most usually are the ones that post constantly and are across various websites. So one, if you have great work, you will get noticed, and it might take longer if you're only on like one site. But my biggest advice with marketing yourself is be on as many platforms as you can be that isn't overbearing for you to manage. So like right now, for my personal stuff, I have Facebook, DeviantArt, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, ArtStation, and oh gosh, I always forget the other, DrawCrowd. And I update pretty frequently on like a few of them, and then some of them I keep more as like a portfolio. So like only for pieces that are really standouts for me. And I think that's the best way to treat your work, where you don't have to upload on every single site every time you create anything. Or sometimes maybe keep your sketches limited to just like Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, and then your final pieces to the other ones. The other thing is not being let down or disappointed when you don't get views or you don't get likes or you don't get comments. And I think we even talked about this last week maybe about how it took like a few years before I started getting likes and comments and the following that I was like desiring so much when I first started. And it was like for selfish reasons. It was like I put all this time and effort into this, and I like literally got 7 views on something, and it's either disheartening or you see it as like empowering. And for me, I was like empowered, where I was like, okay, I'm gonna do something better than next time. And I kept trying to follow that trend, and then it became where I forgot what artist I watched, but they were talking about how you do art for yourself. You don't do it for other people. And when you truly do it for yourself, it's hard. It's very, very hard to get noticed right out the gate, because it's easier to get noticed when you do fan art. And sometimes I even recommend that to artists just to get started, and then kind of switch to original as they become more known. So the other question is how to talk to other artists. Send them an email. And the worst thing you can do is expect a response, because they are most likely very busy people, and unfortunately they don't have the time to respond to every single person that talks to them. And it's one of those things where just don't get like sensitive about it, where it's okay, that happens, like he couldn't read it. Oops. Hold on, let me close that out.
The terminologies, don't take it personal.
Yeah. And I think with the big name artist, you'll be surprised how sometimes if you send 10 emails out, there might be one that gets back to you, and it'll be very helpful, and maybe you'll have a deeper appreciation for that artist. So I don't know. It's one of those where I think that's the best way to say it. Don't get personal if they don't get back to you. But you'll never talk to them if you never take that first step. So I think email a bunch of people, but then don't be disappointed if most of them don't get back to you. Because I think that's like the realistic way to look at it too.
We're hitting the 3 o'clock mark.
All right, beautiful. So I got like 10 more minutes I want to say on this, and that will kind of end off the stream here. I'm gonna make this hump a little less humpy. All right, so the last few things I'm going to do here is I'm going to add texture to the cherry. So we've added a like subtle hinting and some texture brushes to it, but for this last part, I'm going to switch to, I think I had 2 different brushes I used in the example that I liked. Where's the first one? Okay, this is the first one, where it's a metallic brush, or it's meant to be for like rust and a slight metallic surface. But I like the impression that this gives off, because sometimes you'll be surprised where like a brush, its purpose might not be like this is for metal, but when I used it on the cherry, I got the same effect and the same look that I was going for. So sometimes experiment with the different brushes you have and don't limit them to what their original intention was. So I'm just lightly grazing over here. You know what? I think I'm going to do 1 layer of soft light for the blend mode. So I'm going to make 1 new layer of soft light, just because I think some of these upper red areas, and since we're kind of on a time crunch, I want to make them slightly lighter in red. So I'm going to, with the soft light, it's a great blend mode because overlay can sometimes be a little intense with oversaturation, but soft light will add some of that softness to it, or that lighter value, without it being oversaturated. So I'm choosing this light gray with just like a hint of red in it. And I'm just lightly brushing over some of the top areas of the cherry. And then just barely on the highlight itself. And maybe some of that bounce lighting. So it may not seem like much, but when I turn that layer on and off, you can see how it just adds just a bit more of that pop that we didn't have before. Now the next one is a skin brush. Because to get those individual pores, like if I zoom in here, oops, whoop, too much. If I zoom in on the cherry here, you can see, even though this is the drawing that I did, the reference that I had these speckles of like little freckles, and they were red. And to get that effect, rather than dabbing it on with the brush, I'm just going to go ahead and use a skin pore brush. First, I'm going to make sure I have that red selected. And try to find the right size that's appropriate for what you're working on. And then lay it on. There we go.
Sunday Moonshadow asks, do you listen to music when you draw? And if yes, does the music inspire you to draw specific things?
Absolutely. When I'm usually doing character pieces, I usually listen to music that represents them as a person. And I think I annoy sometimes Joe and my other roommate because I like to listen to songs on repeat, where I kind of get lost in the sound, where it becomes more of like a background white noise, and I'm like in that flow. It's like even today, where was it?
I think it was Circles. Is that
The
what you're
what?
listening to? Circles?
No, it
The
was
white one?
Cirque Lila. And it's if you go
Ah,
to Sigur Ros's new page, they promoted this. It's not their song, but they promoted it, and I've been listening to that on repeat all day, and it's beautiful. Where I get it's really easy for me to get lost in like orchestrated type music or music that isn't like rock or pop. That I enjoy more of like enjoying a summer day or like barbecuing or like being in a car. But when I'm drawing, I definitely like more orchestrated sounds, or piano music is really soothing for me.
so I say, yeah, lately I've been listening to the Ruby soundtrack. So I'm just like, man, Monayum was so awesome, you know. And so I'm just like super inspired by him. And so I've just been listening to the Ruby soundtrack over and over again.
So I think at this point I'm just going to go through and do minor polish pass, do some detailing in certain areas, but for the most part, I would. Oh, you know what? I can't even believe I just. Hold on. Why does that look so strange? Oh. All right, hold on. So you can see like this is a problem right here where there's some opacity transfer that must have got erased and then I drew over it. So I'm going to the foundation layer and I'm filling it back in. There you go. But the thing that I was like that was glaringly missing was the cast shadow and the foundation that I put it on. So I'm going to create a new layer underneath of all the layers we just created. And then I'm going to switch to, I'm going to do the basic soft edge brush. Oh, now I'm getting a echo again.
Are you?
Yeah.
How about now?
Echo? Oh no, now we're good. All right. Well, that's okay. I'm fine with it. All right. So first, I'm just gonna lay out this base color. It's like a slight pink, but the main thing is I'm gonna make my brush size smaller. I'm gonna choose a dark red first. So I'm not just going to black to create my shadows. I like to have my shadows have some color incorporated based on the object that's casting the shadow. Now sometimes, like if the shadow isn't directly being casted from an object that's nearby, I will choose colors that are less color oriented, but when it's something like this where it's sitting right on, I do like to incorporate the color of the object as if the light was like bouncing underneath. And Let me do that stroke again because it's really easy to make something like this feel like it's grounded, like it's on a foundation. So to do it, underneath of the cherry layer, I'm slightly brushing first to give it some kind of like an initial shadow, and then where it's really close to the object, I'll go in and I'll darken it just a touch, as if that's where it's like really, that's the occlusion shadow. Something like that. And then usually when I do this kind of stuff, I have to I take a step back and I really look at it and do I feel like, does this feel representative and accurate of the form? Where I actually do feel like this does a pretty good job. Maybe a little more on this side. And then from here, like I said, I would just go through and do some of the blending where like maybe this bounce shadow was a bit heavy on the bottom.
Micah Tisdale says, "Hey guys, any good tips on college?"
Yes, this is something we talk about a lot too, where I believe that there is some, well, this is more of a generality with colleges, but school is not necessary for concept artists or for illustrators. I do think you can get a sense of networking and you can meet people that you otherwise wouldn't have met or have a structure in place that you otherwise wouldn't have had. But I sometimes feel like the price that they expect artists to pay is just it's unreasonable for the career that we're going into and the actual quality of the education in some regards. So I think there are benefits, but if you're someone that can be self-motivated and are really good at giving them yourselves like their own structure, then I think anything that you want to learn can be found online. I taught myself a lot of what I know in Photoshop through YouTube tutorials and videos that I watched while I was in college, because my college only taught 3D design. So actually my college didn't teach anything about what I'm teaching and what I do on a day-to-day basis. And YouTube really helped me with a lot of it, and DeviantArt, a lot of DeviantArt tutorials. And sometimes DeviantArt, or at least when I went to school, it was more frowned upon as like a fan art hub. But if you just typed in like tutorials on drawing leaves or trees or something where it was very specific, like there would be 1 or 2 tutorials out there that really took the time and broke it down and explained it to people. And for me, that's all I wanted. I just wanted someone to give me a breakdown of how they did it and show me the tools on how to use it so that I can create it on my own. And that's what DeviantArt and YouTube was for me. So I think you can teach yourself, and school is not necessary. But if you want that structure and you want that community of like-minded people and networking, and you want to have that in person, then yeah, I think school is a great option for that.
Something else that's really important, I guess, is like if you're in school right now, um, and you know how much you're paying for your tuition, uh, see how many days you're actually in school for, like write it down and divide it, and figure out how much you're
Oh yeah.
paying a day for class. Because something that I struggled with when I was in college was just getting to class. I know that sounds like really dumb, but uh, one of my professors one day pulled me out of class and was like, "Look, you're spending like $400, every week on classes, and if you don't show up to my class, you're wasting money." And that kind of shook me out of like the whole like don't go to class. Like I'm not gonna go to class 6. I'd rather go do this or something. And but that was huge to break it down in that sense and be like, I'd be sitting there like, okay, well, I can stay at home and draw, or I could, walk over to my class and actually learn something or go. And it
How
was,
often did you skip class?
it depended on the class. I mean, art history at 7 a.m. was not always a fun one to go to.
I feel like I maybe missed like 4 classes total.
But yeah, no, definitely if you're in college, go to class. I know that sounds dumb and most people say it, but if that's not enough, look at how much money you're spending and make sure that it's worth it.
Totally agree. All right, so I think I'm getting close to being finished with this cherry. So I think at this point, I'm going to look through the comments, and if you have any last-minute questions, now the time to ask. Uh, and let me go ahead and look through these questions here. I hope you guys were able to follow along. I know for some of that I was answering questions, so I wasn't explaining the process as much, but I was hoping that maybe you guys would be able to take this as a challenge to see if you can do it yourself, and then if you needed a quick brush up, look back to see what I was doing and then try to copy it quickly, but kind of take it as your own. All right, let's see. Someone's asking, hey Tim, so I find myself, or Christy's asking, I find myself getting overwhelmed when I color, and I think it's because I start with too many colors on my color palette. Is there a way I can make my color palette smaller? And that's absolutely, there's even websites dedicated to giving you palettes that are in harmony with each other, but are limited to like 5 or 6 colors. And if you are aware that you're adding too many colors, then yeah, you're probably adding too many colors. Just a rule of thumb is work with a few limited colors that work well together, and then use variants of that. So like the red that we used here is in harmony with the greens here, but for the most part, I feel like overwhelmingly, like you could blend these together, and the color for the most part of the green is that, and for the red, it's actually maybe a little darker, like that. So these two colors are in harmony with each other, and then having like slight variants of those colors, I think that's much better than working with like a rainbow of colors right from the get-go. And like I said with the cherry, always rely, or not always, but you can always rely, well, I won't say always, but if you needed, gray is always a great color to pull from to make other colors stand out more without feeling like you have to add more color to it. If anything, you're subtracting color when you add gray on your piece to add more vibrancy to the other colors. Snack time. Do you prefer fruit or veggies? Veggies. I have a kale addiction. What about you, Joe?
I'm allergic to fruit, so I'm gonna go with veggies. But I'm also allergic to a lot of veggies, so I'm gonna go with meat.
Oh boy. Benedict is asking, how do I know when to stop a piece? I am at that moment of working on the crab, and he's talking about the assignment for the workshop, and I feel like I totally have to rush it to finish it in time, but I want to grind it out. So, like even with this cherry, I knew I had an hour to work on it for the most part. So I tried to, and I think it's sometimes subconsciously you create like a time. I don't even know how to describe this, but like, yes, I do. You create a path that you know you're going to take, and that you only have an hour's worth of time. So you know like the first 10 minutes is like or maybe even like the first 5 minutes is like foundation values. And then from there, like you kind of time it out. And once you draw enough times, you kind of know how long each different section would take you. Like for me, I knew the polishing and some of the texture work with blending would take me longer than, let's say, like laying out the foundation or erasing the excess. So I'm able to work pretty efficiently knowing the time that I'm given. I think that just comes with when you draw over and over and over again, you kind of know yourself and how long certain aspects of drawing takes you. So for the crab that you're talking about, I think that was a highly detailed subject matter, so I was very curious to see how long it would take students, or how much they would invest in the crab assignment, because it was a very detailed and some would say overwhelming assignment. So I wasn't expecting everyone to like finish perfect looking crabs. I was expecting everyone to give it their best shot though. Let's see here. Kate is asking, do you guys have or had any pets? I had a 3-legged Labrador. She was hit by a car when she was very little, but then after her leg was cut off, she was fine, so she was able to run around. And that was, I guess, the only big pet. I had a couple turtles. I had a frog, and like various other fish. But as of right now, I do not have any pets. I probably would have gotten a dog by now, but Joe is allergic, and I'm not gonna just invade
I
his senses
appreciate
with
you
dog
not
gander.
giving me sinus infections every week.
Yeah, and I'd rather not deal with Grumpy Joe. Joe, that question was for you as well.
Oh, I mean that was my family's always had pets, but I've always been allergic to pets, and I've always been like the sick kid, and I always would get sinus infections, and my parents would be like, "Why do you keep getting sinus infections?" And then it's like, "Oh, it's because you're highly allergic to dogs and cats
It's
and
like you're
everything
doubly
else on the
allergic.
face of Earth." But for some reason, they're like, "We'll just get a hypoallergenic dog, and then like that dog will like lick me, and I'll break out into hives." It's really bad.
I feel so bad for you, Joe.
um, I love pets. I think they're awesome, but I just could never like play with them. You know, lizards were always cool. We had a couple lizards growing up.
Yeah, I like lizards.
Lizards are pretty sweet. So we just like chill. The eating crickets thing was kind of weird though.
Yeah, and then you had to like raise crickets in a separate. I remember that one of my friends had a lizard.
Yeah.
Oh, I would really love a pet pig. I don't know if I've said this before on stream, but I really wanted a pet pig, but that might be for a future investment. Okay, let's see here. Man, we got a lot of serious questions today.
Oh, there's a good one. By Manumo Art that says, "Is it possible to find a part-time job as a concept artist?"
Yes. Usually that's freelance work.
Yeah.
Um, we even have a friend that was here last night. He does a lot of freelance work where this is where networking plays a big role in being a concept artist, especially if you want to be a freelancer. So a lot of that's who you know. And sometimes, like what we talked about earlier, getting noticed is another challenge by artists. But yeah, to freelance as a concept artist, it's definitely not only is it a thing, but it happens all the time. So yes. Oh, here's a fun one. Hey guys, do either of you speak another language or actively studying one? Lately I've started taking my Japanese language studies more seriously, hoping incorporating my drawing with my studies will make learning a new language easier. That's a cool way to do it. I remember when, like 4 years ago, I thought I was serious about going to Japan, and I learned how to write katakana and hiragana. I learned some kanji, but kanji is a whole beast in itself. But yeah, I would usually draw something, or if I wanted to really learn, like apple, I would write apple in Japanese next to it, and then I would draw the apple. Or like banana. And actually, if you guys didn't know, banana in Japanese is, hold on, let's see if I can test my Japanese 4 years later. I think it's ba. Nana. So banana is the same in Japanese. It's banana. And yeah, and I speak a little bit of Spanish. That's what I was taught in high school, and I'm trying to learn French, but it's been postponed for the time being until I can get some other things figured out. What about you, Joe?
Um. Yeah. Next question. No, I took Spanish in high school. I also took German in high school, and then I went to college. Took like a semester of Spanish. Didn't like the teachers, and then I took French for like 3 years, and don't remember any of it. I would love to learn Japanese, but at the same time, I would much rather put that time and effort into getting better at art. I think eventually down the line, uh, when I like plan to actually travel to Japan, then I'll just sit and grind away for like 5 months, 6 months. Even though I read somewhere that it takes like 2 years to actually become fluent in that language because it's such a difficult language. There was a Oh, Benedict said that he totally missed the stream since when is Concept Cookie CG Cookie? Uh, I guess we never announced that
Oh,
the,
it happened today.
on Facebook that it merged together, didn't it?
Yeah, so what was planned with the new 5.0 is that CG Cookie will be one all-encasing site, and all of our social networks will be CG Cookie. So like on DeviantArt, soon we're going to be CG Cookie rather than Concept Cookie. But on DeviantArt, we're not going to be posting the 3D stuff. We're going to keep it to the 2D digital stuff. But the Facebook was the one hub where we are combining all of them. I think Twitter we're doing that as well. So just know, yes, on Facebook we are now CG Cookie, not Concept Cookie.
Yeah, so if you're following Concept Cookie and not CG Cookie, go follow CG Cookie.
No, they got switched over.
Did it? Like, so everyone that...
Yeah, so now CG Cookie has 60,000 followers. So if you were following Concept Cookie, now you're following CG Cookie.
Oh, okay.
All right, I think that's where we're going to cut off the stream. I want to thank you all for coming to this Wednesday live stream. We do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Time, -5 GMT if you're outside of the States, and we post the topic about 2 hours beforehand. Look forward right now, I think, with the color course. I think me and Joe are going to take a little more time on it, so I would expect mid-August now is when we're going to release it. If I was to be completely honest with you, we might release just a few to like trickle out there and let you guys know we're working on them, but I want to take a good amount of time of making sure we structure the color course to do it right, because I think a lot of artists struggle with color, and I want this course to really be, I want to feel really solid about it, and feel like after you watch it you have a much greater understanding of not only understanding color but working with color. So expect that, and I think that's the big announcement, or that was. I don't think I have any other announcements to tell you guys. What about you, Joe?
I'm pretty sure that there's no really like large announcement out there.
All right.
Besides the fact that I'm not really, this isn't really who I am. This is a mask.
That's exactly who Joe is, actually.
Yes. This is my spirit animal.
Yes.
Ah! My mustache!
So once again, thank you guys for coming, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.